All right, buckle up, everyone, because today we're diving headfirst into some serious data protection.
That's right. We're going to be taking apart StoneFly's DR365V appliance.
Yeah, the data center in a box, is that what they call it?
Something like that.
The one that's supposed to be like the answer to all your ransomware nightmares.
It's getting a lot of buzz, that's for sure. But beyond the hype, there's some really interesting tech here.
Okay, so for our listener who maybe hasn't heard of this thing before, what exactly is the DR365E trying to do?
At its core, it's about keeping your data safe and accessible no matter what, even if, a ransomware attack hits.
Okay, so that's the goal. But I saw that it's Veeam Ready certified. Does that mean it's like totally dependent on Veeam software?
It does utilize Veeam, yeah. But that's actually a big part of why it's so effective. This certification, especially for both object and object with immutability, it means StoneFly's made sure it integrates perfectly with Veeam.
So they've basically taken the best of Veeam and built it right into the hardware.
Precisely.
Yeah.
No more compatibility issues or trying to piece together different solutions. It's all right there.
Interesting. Okay. Now, they talk a lot about this multi-layered defense. Sounds impressive, but is it really that different from a traditional security setup?
Oh, it's a different beast altogether. Think about it. Usually you've got separate systems for your backups, your network, your storage, each with its own vulnerabilities.
Oh, right.
But the DR365V consolidates all of that into one hardened appliance.
Yeah.
One single point of entry that drastically reduces the attack surface.
Fewer doors for the bad guys to try and break down makes sense.
Exactly.
But fewer doors doesn't mean no doors, right? So let's say worst case scenario, ransomware does get through somehow.
Well, that's where air gapping comes into play.
Okay, air gapping. That's like physically disconnecting your backups from the network.
You got it. And the DR365V automates this whole process with Veeam. It's like hitting a kill switch. Your backups become completely invisible to the malware on your system.
So it's like pulling the plug on a hard drive before the virus can reach it.
Exactly. And it's not just any air gapping either. This meets DISA-STIG standards.
Wait, hold on. DISA-STIGs. For our listener who might not be familiar with all the acronyms, what does that even mean?
So DISA-STIGs, that's like the gold standard of security, set by the U.S. Department of Defense.
Oh, okay.
Super comprehensive guidelines for securing systems. And the fact that StoneFly's air gap repositories meet these standards.
So we're talking serious security here.
Absolutely. We're talking military-grade protection for your data.
Okay, I'm liking this more and more. So air gapping is like that physical barrier. But they also talk about this immutability feature. That sounds a bit like science fiction to me.
It does, doesn't it? But it's actually pretty straightforward. Immutability means that for a set period of time, your backups are completely locked down. Can't be changed, can't be deleted, can't be encrypted, even by someone with admin privileges.
So even if some super sneaky ransomware managed to slip through the cracks, it can't actually touch these backups.
Nope, it hits a wall. Immutable backups, they're like a time capsule for your data. Safe and sound.
That's pretty reassuring, I gotta say. But ideally, you want to stop ransomware before it even gets a chance to try, right? Now, I read something about the DR365V using machine learning as part of its defense strategy. Is that what you'd call the first line of defense?
It's definitely a key part of that early warning system. It's like having a super smart security guard who's learned to recognize the patterns of a ransomware attack before it even fully launches.
Okay, so how does that actually work?
The machine learning, it constantly analyzes your backups, looking for anything unusual. It checks file sizes, looks for encryption where there shouldn't be any, and any changes in how files are behaving. Basically anything that screams ransomware.
Like a digital detective sniffing out clues.
Precisely. It can catch those subtle hints that a human might miss.
So it's not just reacting, it's actually trying to predict and prevent attacks.
Exactly. It's a proactive approach to security.
I like it. But what about the data that's not actively being backed up? The stuff that's in use. How does the DR365V protect that?
That's where real-time file system analysis comes in. It's constantly monitoring everything that's happening on your system, looking for any suspicious activity.
So give me an example. What would trigger this alarm?
Let's say a file suddenly pops up with a .locky extension. Classic ransomware move.
Oh.
The DR365V, it sees that, immediately quarantines the file, and sends an alert to your admins.
So it isolates the threat before it can spread.
Exactly. It's all about containment and rapid response.
That's pretty slick. Okay, but let's say worst case scenario again, something slips through, you've got to restore from a backup. How do you know that backup itself isn't infected?
That's a great question, and it's a valid concern. That's where the sandbox testing feature comes in. It lets you create a safe, isolated environment to basically run your backups before you actually restore them.
So you can test them out and make sure they're clean?
Precisely. It's like a dress rehearsal for your recovery process. Make sure everything is working as it should be.
So no nasty surprises when you restore.
Exactly. You can restore with confidence, knowing that your data is safe and sound.
I'm impressed. A lot of thought went into this thing. But it's not just about security, is it? The DR365V also claims some pretty impressive performance enhancements.
Oh, absolutely. And we're not just talking small improvements here.
Okay, like what? Give me an example.
Well, they've managed to achieve zero latency backups.
Wait, zero latency? How is that even possible? I mean, sending data over a network, there's always some delay, right?
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But here's the thing. With the DR365V, both the Veeam software and the storage are on the same appliance.
Ah, I see.
No more network bottleneck. Data doesn't have to travel anywhere. It's all right there. That's how they achieve those lightning-fast backups.
Okay, that makes sense. And what about these unlimited data movers? That sounds like something straight out of Star Trek.
It kind of does, doesn't it? Think of data movers like lanes on a highway. Traditional setups, they might only have a few lanes, which can lead to congestion and slow things down.
Right, bottlenecks.
Exactly. But the DR365V, it's like having a highway with infinite lanes. Data can flow freely, backups happen much faster.
Okay, I can visualize that. So speed and security, we've got that covered. But what about long-term storage, archiving? Can the DR365V handle that too, or is it mainly for short-term backups?
It can definitely handle the long game. The DR365V uses something called tiered storage. Basically, it uses different types of storage for different purposes.
So like what kind of tiers are we talking about here?
Well, you've got your fast block storage for the data you're actively using. Then you've got file storage for less frequently accessed stuff. And then for long-term archives, they use cost-effective S3 object storage.
So it's like a custom storage solution all built in.
Exactly. They've really thought of everything.
Speaking of thinking of everything, what about containerized applications? Those are becoming more and more popular. Can the DR365V protect those too?
Oh, absolutely. They've got that covered. It integrates with Veeam Kaskin, which is specifically designed for protecting Kubernetes environments.
So you can protect your containerized apps and all that data with the same level of security and performance we've been talking about.
Precisely. Traditional servers, cloud-native apps, the DR365V can handle it all.
A true all-rounder, huh? But what about general cloud integration? Does it play nice with public cloud providers, or is it more of a standalone system?
It's actually quite versatile. You can back up and archive to Azure, AWS, whatever suits your needs. Or if you want the ultimate security and control, you can go with StoneFly's own private cloud, which is built with air gapping and immutability from the ground up.
So no matter your cloud strategy, you've got options.
Exactly. Flexibility is key.
And what about hardware choices? Can you customize the storage media to balance performance and cost?
Absolutely. You can mix and match NVMe SSDs for lightning-fast performance, SAS drives for a good balance of speed and capacity, and then HDDs for those cost-effective archive.
You can tailor it to your specific needs and budget.
Precisely. It's all about customization.
Okay, now, this is what really caught my eye. The integrated dual hardware controller, this R2 model. It's like having two appliances in one, right?
That's a great way to put it. And what's really cool is that each controller has its own separate hardware.
So two completely independent systems.
Yes. Two security zones within the same unit. It's like having a backup for your backup.
So even if one controller fails, the other one can take over seamlessly.
Exactly. No downtime, no data loss.
But that second controller, it's not just about redundancy, right? There are other things you can do with it.
Oh, absolutely. You can configure it for air-gapped storage, high availability failover, even a dedicated sandbox environment for testing. Tons of possibilities.
Wow, that's impressive. Okay, so we've talked security, we've talked performance, but what about scaling? Can this thing grow with a business, or are you stuck with a fixed capacity?
Scalability is one of the DR365V's strongest points. It can grow right alongside your needs. You can scale vertically by adding more storage, or horizontally by adding more nodes to the system.
So it's future-proof, basically.
Absolutely. Start small, scale big, no problem.
Okay, so with all these features and all this flexibility, what are people actually saying about the DR365V? Is it living up to the hype?
We've got some great feedback from companies like Ecker Enterprises, WWF Canada, even a district council. They're all praising it for its simplicity, its scalability, and importantly, its affordability.
So it's not just theory, it's delivering in the real world.
Exactly. It's making enterprise-grade data protection accessible to everyone.
I'm really impressed by everything we've talked about so far. StoneFly's really upped the ante with this appliance, especially in a world where ransomware is such a constant
You
threat.
definitely have. And I think this level of integrated, proactive data protection is going to become the new standard.
I think you're right. This is the future of data security.
Absolutely.
All right, well, I think we've covered a lot of ground here. Maybe we should pause and give our listener a chance to absorb all this information before we dive into some of the finer details.
Sounds good to me. We still have plenty more to unpack.
Exactly. We'll be back in just a moment to continue our deep dive into the StoneFly DR365V. See you soon.
Welcome back, everybody. Hope you're ready for round two, because we're about to dig even deeper into this DR365V.
I gotta admit, my head's still spinning a bit from all that security stuff we unpacked in the first part.
Yeah, StoneFly definitely didn't skimp on the protection.
No kidding.
Yeah.
But it's not all just about the tech itself, right? What are actual users saying about this thing?
You're right. Let's hear from the people on the front lines. We've got some feedback from companies using the DR365V, and it's pretty compelling.
Okay, let's jump into those testimonials. First up, Ecker Enterprises. They do some pretty complex construction projects, right?
Right, so their data is critical. Any downtime, and it could cost them big time.
So what do they have to say about the DR365V?
They were really impressed with the scalability. Like, it just grew with their needs, no hiccups, no disruptions.
Makes sense. Construction projects, you're talking about massive amounts of data.
Exactly. They called it a stable foundation for their whole business, which is high praise coming from them.
So peace of mind for them, knowing their data is safe no matter what.
Exactly. Next up, WWF Canada. They're all about conservation, dealing with tons of environmental data.
Yeah, I bet data integrity is crucial for them.
Absolutely. And for them, it was the ease of use that stood out. They said the interface was super intuitive, even for complex tasks.
That's a big win, especially if you don't have a whole team of IT specialists.
Right, you don't want to be wrestling with complicated software when you're trying to save the planet.
No kidding. Okay, and lastly, we've got a district council managing essential services for a whole community.
Yeah, 75,000 people relying on them. Talk about high stakes.
So for them, what were the big selling points?
Security and budget. They loved that the DR365V met those strict DISA STIGs requirements but didn't cost a fortune.
A best of both worlds.
Right. And the scalability, again, was a huge factor for them. They could start small and grow as their needs changed.
It's really cool to see how the DR365E is working for such a diverse range of organizations.
It really is. It's like StoneFly has found this sweet spot between security, performance, and affordability.
Yeah, it's not just for the big guys anymore. But let's step back for a second, look at the bigger picture. What does the emergence of technology like this tell us about the state of data protection?
Well, I think it shows just how fast things are evolving in the cybersecurity world.
It's a whole new ballgame.
Right. Ransomware is up to the ante, and traditional backup methods just don't cut it anymore.
It's like trying to fight a tank with a slingshot.
Exactly. You need a multi-layered defense, got to be proactive, got to be a little paranoid even.
And that's what the DR365V is all about, right? It's bringing all these cutting-edge technologies together.
Air gapping, immutability, machine learning. It's like a fortress for your data.
Okay, so we have all these advancements. But why are we still seeing so many ransomware attacks happen?
It's frustrating, isn't it? I think it comes down to a few things. Some organizations underestimate the threat. Some just don't have the resources to implement a proper security strategy.
It's like knowing you should wear your seatbelt, but thinking, it won't happen to me.
Right. And then, boom, you get in an accident, and suddenly you wish you'd been more careful.
And in the cyber world, those accidents can be devastating.
No kidding. Business operations, finances, reputation, it can all be wiped out.
Okay, well, let's not dwell on the doom and gloom too much. We've talked a lot about defense, but the DR365V isn't just about playing defense, right? It can actually help businesses thrive, not just survive.
Absolutely. It's not just about preventing data loss. It's about accessibility, efficiency.
It's about using your data to your advantage.
Exactly.
And that's where this whole scalability thing really comes into play.
It does. And that's something we'll delve into even deeper in the next part.
Okay, you've piqued my curiosity now. Tell me more about how the DR365V can actually help businesses grow and evolve.
Well, for that, you'll have to stay tuned.
All right, everyone, we'll be back in just a moment to explore how the DR365V empowers businesses to scale and succeed in a data-driven world. Don't go anywhere. All right, welcome back to our deep dive. We've talked security, we've heard from users, and now it's time to tackle something that's super important, but often gets overlooked: scalability.
Yeah, you're right. Scalability, it's kind of like the unsung hero of data protection.
Because what good is a super secure system if it can't keep up as your business grows, right?
Exactly. It's like building a house on a foundation that's too small. Eventually, you're going to run out of space.
You're going to hit those limits.
Right, and then you have to start making compromises, and nobody wants that.
So with the DR365V, it sounds like StoneFly is really focused on building a system that can grow and adapt along with your needs.
Absolutely. And they've given you options, which is great. You can scale vertically or horizontally.
Okay, so for our listener who might not be familiar with those terms, what's the difference between vertical and horizontal scaling?
Think of vertical scaling like adding another floor to your house. You're increasing the capacity of your existing system.
So more storage, more processing power, that kind of thing.
Exactly. It's a simple way to handle more data without changing the whole structure of your setup.
Okay, makes sense. And horizontal scaling.
Horizontal scaling is more like building an extension onto your house. You're adding more nodes to the system, creating a cluster of DR365V appliances that work together.
So multiple appliances working in parallel.
Exactly. And that gives you some big advantages, especially in terms of performance and redundancy.
Okay, I can see how they would speed things up. But what about redundancy? How does that work with horizontal scaling?
Let's say one of your DR365V nodes crashes. In a horizontally scaled system, the other nodes just pick up the slack, no problem.
So there's no interruption, the data is still protected.
Exactly. It's like having a built-in safety net.
I like that.
Mm.
But with all these options, it might seem a bit overwhelming. How do you decide which scaling approach is right for you?
It really depends on your specific needs and priorities. How much data do you have? How fast is it growing? What's your budget like?
So it's not one size fits all.
Not at all. That's the beauty of the DR365V. You can customize your scaling strategy to fit your situation.
You can start small and grow as needed.
Precisely. You don't have to overspend on capacity you don't need yet.
Okay, so that's the technical side of scalability. But how does this actually translate into real-world benefits for businesses?
Well, for one, it gives you peace of mind knowing that your data protection system can handle whatever you throw at it.
So no more worrying about outgrowing your system.
Right. But it's not just about peace of mind, it's also about performance. Remember those unlimited data movers we talked about?
Yeah, the infinite lane highway.
Exactly. In a horizontally scaled system, those data movers become even more powerful. You can back up and restore massive amounts of data super quickly.
So less downtime, more efficiency.
Exactly. And efficiency means productivity, which means ultimately a better bottom line.
Now, scalability often comes with a big price tag. How does the DR365V address that?
Well, StoneFly's designed it to be modular. You can start with a basic configuration and then just add more components as you need them.
So you're not stuck with a huge upfront investment.
Right. You can scale incrementally, which makes it much more affordable.
That's smart. And that flexibility extends to the hardware too, right? You can choose different storage tiers as you scale.
Absolutely. You can optimize for performance, capacity, or cost, depending on what your workloads demand.
That's like a data protection solution that grows with you.
Exactly. It's future-proof.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the DR365V, but why should our listener care about scalability in general? What's the big takeaway here?
Well, the reality is data is exploding. Businesses are generating more data than ever before, and that trend's not slowing down.
So if your data protection system can't keep up, you're going to have problems.
Big problems. It's not just about ransomware anymore. It's about making sure your data is accessible, manageable, that it's working for you, not against you.
It's about turning your data into an asset, not a liability.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into the StoneFly DR365V. Hopefully our listeners now have a better understanding of what makes this appliance so unique, especially when it comes to scalability.
I agree. And if anyone wants to dig deeper into the technical details, I highly recommend checking out StoneFly's website.
Yeah, they've got tons of resources, case studies, demos, all sorts of good stuff.
It's worth a look.
And remember, data protection is not a luxury anymore, it's a necessity. So take the time to evaluate your current strategy and see if something like the DR365V could be the right fit for you.
Couldn't agree more.
All right, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.